I never thought a homeowners association could ruin my life over snow removal. But here I am, sitting in my kitchen at 6 in the morning, watching 18 inches of fresh powder bury the cul-de-sac while my neighbors frantically text me to clear the street. The thing is, I would love to help. I've been the unofficial snow removal guy for Oak Ridge Meadows in Burlington, Vermont, for the past 3 winters. But thanks to Barbara Hutchins and her new emergency HOA regulations, my hands are legally tied until 8 o'clock. And by then, those screaming parents are going to learn a very expensive lesson about micromanagement. Let me back up a bit. My name is Frank Zimmerman, and I moved to this supposedly quiet subdivision 4 years ago after my divorce. The place seemed perfect at first. Just 30 homes arranged in a neat little loop off Route 7, close enough to downtown Burlington for decent restaurants, but far enough out that you could see stars at night. The HOA was minimal back then, basically just collecting dues to maintain the entrance sign and organize an annual block party. Then Barbara moved in 2 doors down from me. Barbara Hutchins was 52 years old with that specific haircut that should come with a warning label. You know the one, short and severely angled with blonde highlights that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager," from 3 blocks away. She had moved from Connecticut after her husband took a job at the University of Vermont, and she apparently had nothing better to do than attend every single HOA meeting and volunteer for every committee, until she eventually maneuvered herself into the president position last spring. At first, her changes seemed reasonable. She organized a neighborhood watch program and got everyone to agree on unified mailbox designs. Then she started getting creative. No holiday decorations before Thanksgiving. No cars parked on the street overnight. No lawn maintenance before 9 on weekends. Each new rule came with the same explanation that we needed to maintain property values and present a unified, respectful community image. The snow shoveling rule came 3 weeks ago, right after the first real snowfall of the season. I had been out at 5:30 that morning with my plow attachment on my truck, clearing the main loop so people could get to work. I did this voluntarily, never asked for payment, just figured it was being a good neighbor. The subdivision is private property, so the city doesn't plow our streets, and waiting for everyone to dig themselves out individually meant people missed work and the school bus couldn't make it in. I was finishing up around 7 when Barbara came storming out of her house in a pink bathrobe and duck boots, her face already red with anger. She marched right up to my truck and started banging on the window. I rolled it down, expecting maybe a thank you or at least a good morning. "What do you think you are doing?" she shrieked, and I could see her breath fogging in the cold air. "Plowing the street," I said, genuinely confused. "Same as always." "It is 7 in the morning. People are trying to sleep." I looked around at the neighbors already warming up their cars for work, clearly awake and grateful for the clear street. "Barbara, people need to get to work. The bus comes at 7:45. That is not the point. The point is that you are making excessive noise during quiet hours." I have been getting complaints. This was news to me. From who? That is confidential. But the board has discussed this, and we are implementing a new rule. No snow removal equipment before 8 a.m. on any street within Oak Ridge Meadows. We will be sending out an official notice by the end of the week. I stared at her. You can't be serious. If I wait until 8, half the neighborhood will have already left for work and the bus will get stuck. Then people will need to wake up earlier and shovel their own driveways, or they can wait until after 8 for you to clear the street. This is about being respectful of everyone's right to peaceful morning hours. She turned and marched back to her house before I could argue further. I sat there in my truck, engine rumbling, absolutely stunned. This wasn't just stupid, it was actively harmful to everyone in the neighborhood. The official notice came 3 days later, printed on official HOA letterhead and stuck in everyone's mailbox. It outlined the new noise ordinance for enhanced quality of life, which banned the use of any gas-powered equipment, including but not limited to lawn mowers, leaf blowers, chainsaws, and snow removal equipment before 8 a.m. or after 8 p.m. on any day. Violation would result in a $250 fine for the first offense, $500 for the second, and potential legal action for continued violations. I immediately called an emergency meeting of my own, just a casual gathering at my house with about 15 neighbors who I knew would be affected. We sat around my living room, drinking coffee and trying to figure out what to do. Can she even enforce this? Asked Marcus Peterson from number 14. He was a nurse who worked 7 a.m. shifts at the hospital and needed to leave by 6:30. Legally, yeah, said Tom Brennan, who was a lawyer, though he specialized in corporate law, not HOA disputes. The HOA covenants give the board pretty broad authority to create rules for the common good. We all signed those covenants when we bought our houses. But this isn't for the common good, protested Jennifer Wu from number 8. This is going to make it impossible for people to get to work on time. And what about the school bus? Has anyone actually complained about the snow plowing? I asked. Everyone shook their heads. A few people pulled out their phones and started checking the neighborhood Facebook group and email chains. Nothing. Not a single complaint about early morning snow removal. This is Barbara on a power trip, said Marcus flatly. She did the same thing at her last neighborhood in Connecticut. My wife looked her up online. There were articles in the local paper about her trying to ban kids from playing in the street. We spent 2 hours drafting a petition to present to the HOA board, signed by 23 of the 30 households. We requested an emergency meeting to discuss the snow removal rule and pointed out the practical problems it would create. We were polite, factual, and reasonable. Barbara responded with a 2-line email stating that the board had thoroughly discussed the matter and the rule would stand. The next board meeting was not scheduled until February and the agenda was already full. Our concerns were noted for future discussion. Future discussion, I muttered to myself, reading the email for the 3rd time. It was early December. We had at least 3 more months of heavy snow ahead of us. The next snowfall was light, just 3 inches, and it came on a Saturday. Most people could sleep in, and by the time 8 a.m. rolled around, several neighbors were already out with their own shovels. I did my usual plowing route, and everything was fine. Then came the 2nd week of December, when the weather forecast started showing a major nor'easter headed our way. The predictions were for 12 to 18 inches, starting late Tuesday night and continuing into Wednesday morning. Wednesday was a school day, and most of my neighbors had to work. I went to bed Tuesday night watching the snow already beginning to fall, thick, heavy flakes that accumulated fast. My alarm went off at 5 a.m., and I looked out to see at least 14 inches already on the ground, with more coming down. The street was completely buried. I could barely see where the road ended and the lawns began. I pulled on my winter gear and headed out to my truck. The plow attachment was already mounted from the previous week. I started the engine, letting it warm up, and sat there for a moment, looking at the clock. 5:15 a.m. I could have the entire neighborhood cleared in 45 minutes, well before anyone needed to leave for work or school. But that $250 fine hung over my head, and more than that, the principle of the thing. I had tried to work with Barbara, tried to show her how unreasonable this rule was. She had shut down every attempt at compromise. I turned off the truck and went back inside. By 6:30, my phone started buzzing. Text messages from neighbors who were looking out their windows and panicking. "Frank, are you going to plow this morning? Hey man, the street is completely buried. Any chance you can clear it before the bus? Frank, I have surgery scheduled at 7:30. I need to leave by 6:45. Can you please plow?" I responded to each one with the same message. "HOA rule says no plowing before 8 a.m. I will be out at 8 o'clock. The responses came back fast and furious. "What rule? Are you serious right now? Frank, this is an emergency." I sent out a group text to everyone who had contacted me, along with a copy of Barbara's official notice. "Take it up with the HOA president. I am not paying $250 for helping the neighborhood." My phone rang 30 seconds later. It was Marcus. "Frank, I get what you are doing, but some of us really need to get out of here. I am going to lose my job if I am late again." "I know, Marcus, and I am sorry, but I tried to fight this. We all signed that petition. Barbara does not care. Maybe if everyone experiences the consequences of her stupid rule, she will finally listen." There was a long pause. "You are using us as leverage." "I am following the HOA rules," I said. "That is what Barbara wanted. Everyone has to follow the rules, right?" He hung up without saying goodbye. I felt bad, but I also felt that burning anger that comes from being completely powerless against bureaucratic stupidity. I had tried the reasonable approach. I had tried compromise. I had tried collective action. Nothing worked. So fine, we would do it Barbara's way. By 7 a.m., I could hear the sound of people trying to shovel their driveways by hand, the scrape of metal on concrete mixing with frustrated shouts, and the sound of car engines struggling in the deep snow. A few people tried to drive out anyway. I watched from my window as Jennifer Wu's sedan made it about 15 feet before the wheels spun uselessly, and she got stuck sideways across the street. At 7:30, I heard the rumble of the school bus attempting to turn into our subdivision. The driver made it about 20 feet past the entrance before I heard the engine rev and then the hiss of air brakes. The bus was stuck. My doorbell started ringing at 7:40. I opened it to find 5 of my neighbors standing on my porch, all of them in various states of winter dress, all of them looking furious and desperate. "Frank, the bus is stuck," said Jennifer. "My kids are going to miss school. I am stuck in the street, and I have a meeting at 9 I cannot miss." "It is 7:40, I said, checking my watch. 20 more minutes and I can legally help." "This is ridiculous," shouted Paul Henderson from number 22. "You are being petty." "I am following the rules," I said calmly. "The rules that Barbara Hutchins and the HOA board implemented. If you have a problem with them, call Barbara." "We have been calling her," said Marcus, pushing forward through the group. "She is not answering." "Well, she is probably sleeping," I said. "You know, enjoying those peaceful morning hours that the noise ordinance is designed to protect." The sarcasm was not lost on them. Jennifer looked like she wanted to punch me, but Tom put a hand on her shoulder. "He is right," Tom said quietly. "This is not Frank's fault. We need to make Barbara deal with this." The group dispersed, everyone pulling out phones to call, text, and email the HOA president. I went back inside and made myself breakfast, watching the clock slowly tick toward 8 a.m. At 7:55, Barbara's garage door opened. She backed her white Lexus SUV out carefully, navigating around the accumulated snow in her driveway. She had apparently paid her lawn service to come shovel her out specifically, because her driveway was clear while everyone else's was buried. She made it to the street and immediately got stuck in the exact same spot where Jennifer's car was still sitting. I grabbed my coffee and went outside, leaning against my porch railing to watch. Barbara got out of her car, slipping slightly in her high-heeled boots, and stared at the buried street with an expression of absolute shock. It was as if it had never occurred to her that her rules would apply to her own life. Jennifer walked over from where she had been sitting in her own stuck car. "Good morning, Barbara, enjoying the peaceful morning." "This is unacceptable," Barbara said, looking around at the chaos. The school bus was still stuck at the entrance, its hazard lights flashing. At least a dozen neighbors were standing in their driveways with shovels, having made exactly zero progress on the packed, heavy snow. 2 more cars were stuck in various positions along the street. Why has no one plowed? Because someone implemented a rule banning snow plowing before 8 a.m., Jennifer said, her voice dripping with venom. Barbara's face went pale, then red. "This is an emergency situation. That rule does not apply during emergencies." "Really?" Tom called out from his driveway. "Because I just read the noise ordinance again, and I do not see any exception for emergencies. In fact, it specifically says no exceptions." "Do not be absurd. Obviously, Frank can plow during an actual emergency." "Then you should have written that into the rule," I called out from my porch, checking my watch. "Oh, look at that. It is 8 a.m. now. I guess I can help out." I walked to my truck with exaggerated slowness, taking my time to scrape the windows even though they did not need it. I could feel everyone watching me, could sense the mix of relief and fury coming from different corners of the neighborhood. I fired up the truck and the plow, the engine loud in the cold morning air. I started at the far end of the cul-de-sac and worked my way toward the entrance, methodically clearing a path. It took me almost an hour because the snow was so deep and heavy. By the time I got to the entrance where the school bus was stuck, it was after 9 a.m. The bus driver, a patient woman named Carol who I had helped out dozens of times before, gave me a tired wave as I cleared around her bus. "This is going to make a great story in the teacher's lounge," she said through her open window. "Sorry for the mess," I said. "Honey, this is not your mess." She glanced over at Barbara, who was standing next to her Lexus with her phone pressed to her ear, gesturing angrily. "That is all her." Once the bus was freed, Carol slowly backed out of the subdivision. "I will tell the school what happened. Not sure when I can get back here for pickup this afternoon." The neighborhood spent the rest of the morning digging out. Most people ended up calling in late or taking the whole day off. Marcus made it to work 3 hours late and got written up. Jennifer missed her meeting entirely. 2 other neighbors had similar stories, and all of them knew exactly who to blame. That evening, my email inbox exploded. The neighborhood Facebook group went absolutely nuclear. Everyone was demanding an emergency meeting, a vote to remove Barbara from the board, a complete repeal of the noise ordinance. The anger was not directed at me anymore. People understood I had been put in an impossible position. The fury was entirely focused on Barbara and her stupid rule. Barbara tried to defend herself in a long, rambling email about community standards and how we all needed to think about the greater good. But she got absolutely destroyed in the responses. Even the 2 other board members, who had quietly gone along with her previous decisions, publicly stated they had not realized the snow removal ban would cause such problems, and called for an emergency meeting to discuss it. The emergency meeting was scheduled for that Friday night at the subdivision's clubhouse, a small building near the entrance that we used for HOA gatherings and the occasional birthday party rental. Every single household sent at least one representative. People were standing in the back because we ran out of chairs. Barbara sat at the front table with the other 2 board members, looking defensive and angry. Tom Brennan stood up first, armed with a legal pad full of notes. "I want to start by reading from the HOA Covenants, Section 12. Subsection 4. The board shall create and enforce reasonable rules for the benefit and safety of all residents. I would like to submit that the snow removal rule is not reasonable, and it is definitely not for our benefit or safety. Wednesday morning was a disaster. People missed work, kids missed school, and we had multiple cars stuck in the street. This could have been avoided if Frank had been allowed to plow at his normal time. There was a general murmur of agreement from the crowd. Barbara leaned forward to her microphone. The rule was created because I received multiple complaints about early morning noise. From who? Someone shouted from the back. That is confidential. That is convenient, Jennifer Wu said, standing up. I have lived here for 6 years, and I have never once heard anyone complain about Frank plowing. In fact, I have heard nothing but gratitude. So either you can produce these mysterious complaints, or you can admit you made this rule for your own personal reasons. Barbara's face flushed. I do not have to justify my decisions to you. I am the president of this board. Actually, you do, Tom said. We elect the board to represent our interests, not to create arbitrary rules. And if you cannot provide evidence that this rule benefits the community, then we have grounds to remove you from the board. This got everyone's attention. Barbara sat back, her mouth tight. You cannot remove me. I was elected, and you can be recalled. According to our bylaws, a petition signed by 2/3 of homeowners can trigger a recall vote. I have already started collecting signatures. Tom held up a clipboard. I have 23 signatures already. I only need 20. The room erupted in applause. Barbara looked around at the crowd, finally seeming to realize how completely she had lost them. This is ridiculous, she said, but her voice wavered. Over one morning of inconvenience. It is not about one morning, Marcus stood up, his voice hard. It is about you implementing rules that make our lives harder just so you can feel important. It is about you ignoring legitimate concerns from your neighbors. It is about you refusing to admit when you are wrong. One of the other board members, a quiet accountant named Steve Morrison, cleared his throat. Barbara, I think we should vote to suspend the snow removal portion of the noise ordinance, at least until we can draft something more reasonable. I second that, said the third board member, Ellen Rodriguez. We do not have a quorum for a vote, Barbara said quickly. We need all 5 board members present and 2 are absent. Tom smiled. Actually, according to our bylaws, the board can vote with 3 members as long as the decision is unanimous. But if you want to push this, we can just move forward with the recall petition. Your choice. Barbara sat there for a long moment, her jaw working. Everyone watched her, waiting. Finally, she stood up abruptly. Fine, vote to suspend the rule. I abstain. You cannot abstain, Ellen said. It has to be unanimous for a 3-member vote. Then I vote no. Then we are moving forward with the recall, Tom said calmly. Everyone who wants to sign the petition can see me after this meeting. Barbara grabbed her purse and her coat. You people are impossible. I have done nothing but try to improve this neighborhood, and this is how you repay me. She stormed toward the door, then turned back. You deserve whatever happens when property values crash because no one wants to live in a subdivision with no standards. She slammed the door behind her. The room sat in stunned silence for a moment, then someone started clapping. Within seconds, everyone was applauding. Tom's petition got 30 signatures that night, every single household. The recall process took 2 weeks, as required by the bylaws. Barbara tried to fight it, sending out increasingly unhinged emails about how she was the victim of a witch hunt and how we were all going to regret this. She even tried to fine several people for various minor violations. Parking violations that had never been enforced before. A mailbox that was supposedly the wrong shade of black. lawn decorations that she claimed violated the aesthetic guidelines. Tom shot down each one with polite but firm emails explaining why the fines were not valid. The recall vote was held on a cold Tuesday in January. The results were unanimous. All 30 households voted to remove Barbara from the board. She was given 30 days to vacate her position and return all HOA documents and materials. She lasted 3 days. That Friday, I woke up to see a moving truck in front of her house. By Sunday evening, she was gone. Her husband had apparently accepted a position at a different university, one in Colorado. I suspected the job had been arranged quickly as an escape from the neighborhood disaster. We held an emergency election to fill Barbara's position, and Tom won easily. His first official act was to repeal the noise ordinance entirely and replace it with a simple, reasonable rule. No non-emergency loud equipment before 7 a.m. or after 9 p.m., with exceptions for snow removal, which could be done any time, and other emergency situations to be evaluated case by case. His second act was to officially recognize me as the subdivision's snow removal coordinator and approve a small budget to compensate me for gas and maintenance. I tried to refuse the money, but everyone insisted. They also chipped in to buy me a really nice new snow blower as a thank you gift. The rest of that winter was blissfully boring. We got several more major snowfalls, and each time I was out early, clearing the streets so people could get to work and school. No one complained. In fact, I started getting thank you notes in my mailbox and occasional batches of cookies or homemade bread from grateful neighbors. But the story does not end there, because Barbara could not leave well enough alone. In March, I got a certified letter from a law office in Connecticut. Barbara was suing me for harassment, claiming that I had deliberately sabotaged her car, organized a conspiracy to remove her from the HOA board, and created a hostile living environment that forced her to move. She was seeking $50,000 in damages. I stared at the letter in disbelief. Then I called Tom, who called his actual lawyer friends, and we scheduled a meeting. "This is absurd," said Karen Matthews, the attorney Tom had recommended. She was a sharp woman in her 40s who specialized in civil litigation. "She does not have a case. You followed the rules she created, and the recall was done according to HOA bylaws. There is nothing illegal about any of that. So what do I do?" You respond, which I will help you draft, and you keep every piece of documentation you have. Emails, text messages, meeting minutes, everything. This will probably get dismissed, but we need to be prepared just in case. We filed our response, which laid out the entire timeline of events and included sworn statements from multiple neighbors about what had happened. Karen was confident it would never make it to trial. She was right. 2 months later, the lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice, meaning Barbara could not refile. The judge's ruling was surprisingly blunt, stating that the plaintiff had created her own problems through unreasonable governance and could not claim damages from residents who had exercised their legal rights to recall her. I thought that would finally be the end of it. I was wrong. In June, on a warm Sunday afternoon, I was grilling burgers in my backyard when 2 police cars pulled up in front of my house. I walked around front, spatula still in hand, confused. 2 officers got out looking serious. "Frank Zimmerman." "That is me. What is going on?" "We need to ask you some questions about an incident involving Barbara Hutchins." My stomach dropped. "What kind of incident?" "She filed a police report claiming you have been stalking and harassing her, sending threatening emails and messages." I stared at them. "She moved to Colorado 4 months ago. I have not had any contact with her since she left." "That is not what she is claiming. Can we see your phone and computer?" This was getting scary. Should I call a lawyer? The older officer, whose name tag Reed Patterson, gave me a sympathetic look. That is your right, sir. But if you have nothing to hide, it would be easier to clear this up quickly. I called Tom, who called Karen, who arrived within 20 minutes. She spoke privately with the officers, then came over to me. They want to verify you have not been contacting her. If you give them access to your accounts and they can confirm you are telling the truth, this goes away. If you refuse, they will have to investigate further, and Barbara will probably use that as evidence of guilt. I have nothing to hide, I said. I have not contacted her at all. We spent the next hour going through my phone, my computer, my email accounts, and even my social media. The officers were thorough but professional. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. I had not sent Barbara a single message since she left. Officer Patterson closed his notepad. Mr. Zimmerman, everything here supports your statement. We are going to note in our report that we found no evidence of contact with Miss Hutchins. So what happens now? We will file our report. If she continues to make claims, she is going to need to provide actual evidence, not just accusations. They left, and I stood in my driveway feeling shaken and angry. Karen put a hand on my shoulder. This is harassment on her part now. If she continues, we can pursue a restraining order against her. I just want her to leave me alone. I know. Let us see what happens. What happened was that Barbara apparently filed similar reports with the Colorado police, claiming I was sending her threatening letters. But when they investigated, they found that the return addresses on the letters were fake, and the postmarks did not match Burlington or anywhere near Vermont. Someone was sending her threatening letters, but it was not me. Tom did some digging, reaching out to people who had known Barbara in Connecticut. Apparently, this was a pattern. She had been involved in multiple disputes at her previous neighborhood, had filed lawsuits against 3 different neighbors, and had claimed harassment when things did not go her way. She had also been removed from a school board and a library committee for similar behavior. In August, I got a call from Officer Patterson. Mr. Zimmerman, I wanted to give you an update. Barbara Hutchins has been charged with filing a false police report. The investigation into those threatening letters found that she had been sending them to herself. I sat down heavily. Are you serious? Completely. She was trying to build a case against you and apparently thought creating evidence was the way to do it. Pretty sloppy, though. The handwriting matched samples the Colorado police obtained from her, and security footage from the post office showed her mailing the letters to herself. So what happens to her? That is up to the Colorado DA. False reporting is a misdemeanor there. She will probably get a fine and probation. But the good news for you is that this definitively clears you, and it means if she tries anything else, no one is going to take her seriously. I thanked him and hung up, feeling a weird mix of relief and sadness. Barbara had been so consumed with being right, with punishing people who disagreed with her, that she had literally committed crimes to do it. The Colorado DA did charge her, and she ended up pleading guilty to filing a false report and misuse of police resources. She was sentenced to 6 months of probation, a $1,000 fine, and ordered to undergo counseling. She was also prohibited from contacting me or anyone from Oak Ridge Meadows. By the time fall rolled around, the whole mess had finally settled. The neighborhood had moved on. Tom was doing a great job as HOA president, actually listening to residents and implementing changes that made sense. We had organized a neighborhood watch that was actually useful, instead of just being about spying on each other. The annual Halloween party was the biggest we had ever had. When winter came around again, I was ready. My truck was maintained, the plow was attached, and I had a stockpile of salt and sand. The first snowfall came on a December Tuesday night, about 7 inches of light, fluffy powder. My alarm went off at 5 a.m. and I headed out into the dark, cold morning. The streets were quiet as I worked, just the rumble of my truck and the scrape of the plow. By 6:30, the entire subdivision was clear. Lights were coming on in houses as people woke up for work and school. A few neighbors waved from their windows as I passed. Marcus came out as I was finishing my driveway, holding 2 travel mugs of coffee. He handed me one. "You are a good man, Frank. Thanks for putting up with all that insanity last year." "Someone had to," I said, taking a sip. The coffee was perfect, hot and strong. She really sent herself those threatening letters, apparently so. He shook his head. "That is genuinely disturbing." "Yeah." I looked around at the clear streets, the houses with their lights coming on, the normal routine of a weekday morning. "But at least it is over." "You think she is doing the same thing in Colorado?" "Probably. Some people never learn," he laughed, a short bark of sound in the cold air. "Well, they can deal with her now. We are done." We stood there for a minute, drinking our coffee and watching the sun start to rise over the snow-covered trees at the edge of the subdivision. The school bus rumbled past right on time, Carol giving us a wave as she turned into the neighborhood. "I should let you get to work," Marcus said, taking my empty mug. "See you around." "See you." I went back inside and took a hot shower, washing away the cold and the road grime. As I was getting dressed, my phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Wu. "Thanks for plowing. Cookies coming your way this weekend." I smiled and sent back a thumbs up. This was what a neighborhood was supposed to be like. People helping each other, being reasonable, treating each other with basic respect. It should not have been complicated. The rest of that winter was exactly what the previous one should have been. Every snowfall, I was out early, clearing the streets. No fines, no drama, no angry HOA presidents in bathrobes yelling at me. Just a simple routine that made everyone's lives a little bit easier. Tom's 1-year term as president ended that spring, and he was re-elected unanimously. At the annual meeting, he proposed setting up a proper snow removal fund with a small line item in the HOA budget. The vote passed, 28-2. The 2 no votes were from a couple who had moved in over the winter and did not really understand what we had all been through. After the meeting, several people filled them in on the Barbara saga, and they came over to apologize for voting no. In May, I got one final piece of correspondence related to the whole mess. It was a letter from Barbara's lawyer, forwarding a handwritten note. The lawyer's cover letter explained that his client had written this as part of her counseling and wanted it delivered, but he was required to ensure I knew I had no obligation to respond. I opened the note carefully. Barbara's handwriting was neat and controlled, like she had practiced writing it several times before sending the final version. "Frank, I have spent the last several months in therapy trying to understand why I acted the way I did. My therapist says I have control issues stemming from my childhood, and I tend to overreact when I feel like I am losing authority. None of that excuses what I did. The snow rule was stupid and selfish. The lawsuit was vindictive. The false police reports were criminal, and I am deeply ashamed. I destroyed my own reputation and nearly destroyed your life because I could not admit I was wrong. I do not expect forgiveness, and I am not asking for it. I just wanted you to know that I understand now how much damage I caused, and I am working on being a better person. I hope you and the neighborhood are doing well. Barbara." I read it twice, then put it in a folder with all the other documents from that year. It was something, I supposed, an acknowledgement, an apology. It did not undo the stress and the fear and the anger, but it was more than a lot of people got from those who wronged them. I showed the letter to Tom and Karen. Tom thought it seemed genuine. Karen was more skeptical, suggesting it might be a legal strategy to reduce her culpability if any civil suits came up. I did not really care either way. I was just glad it was over. That summer was peaceful. The neighborhood hummed along nicely. Kids played in the street without anyone calling the HOA to complain. People parked their cars wherever they needed to without getting passive-aggressive notices. We had a 4th of July block party with a proper fireworks show that one of the neighbors who worked in event planning organized. It was loud and went past 9 p.m., and nobody cared. In August, a new family moved into Barbara's old house. They were young, early 30s with 2 small kids and a golden retriever puppy. Their names were David and Lisa Chambers, and within a week, they had introduced themselves to every neighbor on the street. Lisa brought over a plate of brownies as a hello gift. "We heard there was some drama with the previous owner," she said as we stood on my porch, the puppy pulling on its leash trying to investigate my flower beds. "That is one way to put it," I said. "Well, we are pretty low-key, just want a nice quiet place to raise the kids." She smiled. "And David works from home, so if you need any help with snow removal or anything, let him know. He gets cabin fever in the winter," I laughed. "I will keep that in mind." They were good neighbors, exactly what the subdivision needed. David did end up helping with snow removal that winter, and we developed a good system where he would do the driveways with his snow blower while I did the street with the plow. It cut the time in half and gave him an excuse to get outside. By the following spring, the whole Barbara incident had faded into neighborhood legend, the kind of story people told at parties when they had a few drinks. "Remember when we had that crazy HOA president who banned snow plowing?" It became a teaching moment too, a reminder of why HOA boards needed to listen to residents and why rules needed to make sense. Tom stepped down as president after 2 terms, feeling like he had done what he set out to do. Ellen Rodriguez took over and continued his sensible, low-drama approach. The HOA went back to being what it should have been all along, a simple administrative body that maintained common areas and organized the occasional community event. I continued living in my house, doing my snow removal routine every winter, watching the neighborhood evolve. People moved in and out, kids grew up, new families arrived. The story of Barbara and the snow plowing ban became something the old-timers told the newcomers, usually with a lot of laughter and exaggerated details. 3 years after Barbara left, I was at the grocery store in Burlington when I ran into her. I almost did not recognize her at first. Her hair was different, longer and more natural-looking, and she seemed smaller somehow, less imposing. She was standing in the produce section, examining avocados. We made eye contact and I saw her freeze. For a second, I thought she might run. Then she took a deep breath and walked over. "Frank, hi. Barbara. I know you probably do not want to talk to me. I just wanted to say if you got my letter, I meant every word. I am genuinely sorry for everything." She looked different and not just physically. The hard, defensive edge was gone. She just looked tired and a little sad. "I got the letter," I said. "Thank you for sending it." "How is the neighborhood?" "Good, quiet, normal," she nodded. "That is good." "I am glad." She hesitated, then said, "I am back in Vermont temporarily. My dad got sick and I am helping take care of him. I am staying in Colchester." "I am sorry about your dad." "Thank you." She shifted her shopping basket from one hand to the other. "I should let you go. I wanted you to know that the therapy helped. I am on medication now for anxiety and I have learned a lot about why I acted the way I did. I am not making excuses. I just want you to know I am working on it." "That is good, Barbara. Really." She gave me a small, sad smile and walked away. I stood there for a moment, processing the encounter. It was strange, seeing her as a regular person instead of the villain of the story. People were complicated, I supposed. They did terrible things for complicated reasons, and sometimes they actually did the work to change. I did not tell many people about running into her. It felt private somehow, like something that did not need to be part of the neighborhood legend. Tom and Marcus knew, because they asked when they saw me looking thoughtful at the next monthly poker game we had started, but I kept it brief. "She apologized again," I said, dealing cards. "Seems like she actually means it this time." "Good for her," Marcus said. "Still not inviting her to any barbecues." We all laughed and the conversation moved on to other things. Life continued. Winters came and went, and I was always out there at 5 a.m. after a snowfall, clearing the streets so people could get to work and kids could get to school. It was a simple thing, really, just being a good neighbor. But sometimes the simple things mattered most. The Oak Ridge Meadows HOA never implemented another noise ordinance. Tom's balanced, reasonable approach to rules became the standard, and subsequent board presidents followed his example. New residents were given a handbook that included the infamous snow plowing incident as a cautionary tale about overreach and the importance of listening to community feedback. I got older, the neighborhood got older, but the basic rhythm stayed the same. Every annual meeting, someone would propose some new rule or restriction, and someone else would inevitably say, "Remember what happened with Barbara." That was usually enough to either kill the proposal or at least force a serious discussion about whether it was actually necessary. Jennifer Wu ended up joining the board and served for 5 years, bringing a practical, no-nonsense approach that everyone appreciated. Marcus became the neighborhood's unofficial social director, organizing monthly gatherings and holiday events. Tom moved away after a decade, taking a job in Boston, but he stayed in touch and always asked about the neighborhood when we talked. The Chambers family became some of my closest friends. I watched their kids grow up, taught them how to shovel properly, let them ride along in the plow truck when they were old enough. David and I spent countless winter mornings working side by side, clearing snow and talking about everything from politics to parenting to the best pizza places in Burlington. As for Barbara, I never saw her again after that encounter in the grocery store. I heard through the grapevine that her father recovered and she went back to Colorado. Someone said she had gotten involved in community theater out there, focusing her energy on something creative instead of controlling. I hope that was true. Everyone deserved a chance to move past their worst moments. Looking back on the whole experience years later, I could see it as more than just a story about an unreasonable HOA rule. It was about power and control, about what happens when people care more about authority than community, about the importance of standing up for what is right even when it is uncomfortable. That morning when I sat in my truck and chose not to plow, I had been angry and frustrated. But it ended up being the right call. Sometimes, you have to let people experience the consequences of bad decisions before they understand why those decisions were bad. If I had just paid the fine and kept plowing, Barbara would have learned that her rules worked, that she could push people around without pushback. The neighborhood would have continued suffering under increasingly ridiculous restrictions. Instead, by following her rule exactly as written, we exposed how terrible it was. The collective misery of that one morning united everyone against her overreach and led to real change. It was not the most mature approach maybe, but it was effective. And it taught me something important about community. A good neighborhood is not about following rules blindly. It is about people working together, communicating, compromising and looking out for each other. Rules should serve the community, not the other way around. Every winter, when I fired up my truck at 5 a.m. and headed out into the dark to clear snow, I thought about that. I thought about how something as simple as plowing a road could become a battleground, and how important it was to fight for common sense and mutual respect. The snow always fell, as it always had, and I was always there to clear it, as I always had been. But now I did it with the full support of my neighbors and my community, without threat of fines or lawsuits or police reports. Just a guy with a plow truck, helping out his neighbors the way it should have been from the start. That was enough. That was everything.